Hi, this is Rabbits. Welcome to the channel. I'm here today to talk about deck strategies for the Ironclad character in the strategy deck building game Slay the Spire. The Ironclad is a straightforward, damage-dealing character that can win fairly consistently with a variety of strategies, and it doesn't really have many vulnerabilities. Before we begin, I'd like to start by talking about some generally good cards. These are cards that are hard to pass up for any deck and should be considered good pickups in general. Not everyone will completely agree with these picks, but I find their power level is above average and most can be added to any deck without major issues. These cards are Offering, Thunderclap, Battle Trance, Iron Wave, Disarm, Seeing Red, Bludgeon, Double Tap, Reaper, and Feed. Okay, let's start our deck building adventures by discussing possibly the strongest Ironclad deck archetype, the Strength Scaling deck. This deck is usually a true snowball deck in the fact that its damage output generally increases every turn via ever-increasing strength. For every 1 strength you acquire, your damage output increases by 1 point on every hit, so the general strategy here is to acquire strength, then hit hard. This is a fairly easy deck to build that also happens to be pretty good against all bosses. The downside to this deck is that sometimes you end up with hands that do nothing, but that can happen with any deck. The cards that work well with this archetype are Heavy Blade, Inflame, Spot Weakness, Demon Form, Limit Break, Whirlwind, and Flex. Demon Form is one of your strongest cards, but can often show up late or get stuck in your hand, so its value is very dependent on your current bird situation. Early game, Flex plus Whirlwind can take down enemies in a single turn. Next, let's talk about the Strike deck. This deck is fairly obvious, so it's hard not to talk about it. The Strike deck is built around the card Perfected Strike, which increases damage output based on every card whose name contains the word Strike. So your valuable cards include Strike, Perfected Strike, Pommel Strike, Twin Strike, and Wild Strike. All your Strike cards. The biggest advantage of this deck is that it's extremely easy to build and play. Your finisher and every other Strike card appear at common rarity. The downside here is that first, you don't want to remove Strike cards from your deck, which encourages you to keep mediocre cards. In general, these decks are also very large, so it can be hard to find any single card you may need at a given time. This deck is pretty bad at higher Ascension levels due to these factors, so it's really only good at Ascension level 0. Despite that fact, it can beat down and guarding you victories. Now, let's talk about the Block deck. The Block deck can be pretty hard to put together and get running during a given fight, but it's very good against bosses, and it's the ultimate hurdle. If you have an impregnable defense, you only need 1 offensive card in your deck to win. The cards that make this deck work are Body Slam, Shrug It Off, Flame Barrier, Power Through, Barricade, Impervious, and Entrench. As you can see, many of these cards are available only at higher rarity levels, which is why this deck is a little bit hard to put together. Early turns can be difficult with this deck, as you have to choose between defense and playing enabling cards like Barricade, but the reward of runaway defense is often worth a small sacrifice of life. One con to this deck is that since it doesn't run a significant offense, enemies that choke the deck up with nasty status cards are very deadly in later turns. Still, there's an achievement for having 99 and 999 block, so you gotta give this deck a spin, especially when you see its enabling cards early. Let's end our Ironclad archetype discussion by talking about the Glass Cannon build. This is an incredibly inconsistent build, but if you want to speedrun the game for achievements or world record glory, you need to know about this deck. This deck sacrifices all defenses. It's willing to take damage in order to dish it out. The core cards of this deck are Flex, Whirlwind, Heavy Blade, Inflame, Thunderclap, and Clash. In addition, this deck removes defense aggressively, down to 0 as fast as possible. At first turn, Battle Trance into Flex plus Whirlwind is game over in most fights, and a double-tapped Heavy Strike will take a chunk out of any boss. Since you plan to take damage, resting at bonfires happens often. This deck is really only viable at Ascension level 0, and even then, you won't win all the time. Getting a good final boss in this character can make or break a run, with the Slug Overlord Time Eater being your preferred target. I use this deck to get the Speed Climber achievement, which demands you complete the game in under 20 minutes. So, that's my list of viable to good deck archetypes for the Ironclad character. Obviously there's many more viable variants and archetypes, including the one you'll most often get, which is a pile of reasonable cards. These are some of the heavy hitters and obvious strategies to try. If you enjoyed this content, I encourage you to like and subscribe as we're trying to grow the channel. This has been Rabbits. Thanks for watching and have a great day.